Alright, we're up to the point in the series where we can see some real evidence, some real tangible evidence for bringing some sort of spiritual being into material form, symbolizing or using the symbol of a box, even a black box, an iron box. And we've drawn this conclusion all the way down to Iron Maidens, and then the sons of Orion, Osiris, and then this brings us back to the descendants that were later referred as the tribe of Dan, which is an anagram for DNA, in essence the crossing of the genetics, which would connect us to what many people would connect with the planet of crossing, the famed planet of crossing, Nibiru. And then this brings us back to what many people have been taught about these ancient Anunnaki, who are the original fathers of the Nephilim. Now, my aim in this video here is to at least explain to you what I know about it and how I see it, and what all this business means in relationship to what you've learned thus far concerning Enki in some sort of box or cube now you know of being symbolized as a womb. For anybody that... So I guess I'm going to try to help you understand a little bit more about Enki, at least what I know about his role, his title, his duty before and after the rebellion, and a little bit about the mix-up with who Satan is and who Satan has become, recognized in the descendancy connected with SS, sons of Sam, and where this confusion is concerning Enki has a son that's Marduk, and then Marduk is the god of 50 names. These 50 names are going to represent this huge descendancy, this huge multi-family descendancy of Nephilim, in essence, the Marduks, plural, if you will. So the Marduks are what you should understand with the sons of Orion, aka Osiris. They represent the Nephilim descendancy. And there's a confusion because you would see Marduk is symbolized as Enki's son. And the confusion would be later that you see Satan, as I said in the book of Enoch, through Sam Yeza, in essence becomes the father of this plan to produce the descendancy through the union of the daughters of men, these maidens that became soiled, if you will, that murray clay in the book of Daniel. But remember, Sam Yeza never takes of the flesh himself. As I told you, that's a very important marker. It reveals his spiritual identity, himself as a spirit being. He's not in the flesh. And furthermore, as I said, the real identity here is wrapped up in the nature of Enki as Lord of the Earth, Prince of the Earth at this time before his rebellion. But he was put into rebellion by the sophistry of Satan, who brought with him the Lucifer manifesto, of which Lucifer, his superior above him, basically deceived Satan into rebellion, and then Satan, who had the power, and of course a part of his duty, if you will, his universal service, what he was created for, he had the power to go up and down, to and fro amongst the stones of fire, as it is biblically quoted. And that verse right there connected with Job, where Satan goes to visit the sons of God and the Lord. And of course the Lord asks, where have you come from? He says, well, I've come from walking up and down, to and fro, all over the earth. He says up and down, to and fro, of course making the symbolism of a cross. But the point is he's saying he's been going up and down from the earth. And then when you connect his entitlement, his epitaph, his descriptive element of being able to go to and fro amongst the stones of fire. The stones of fire will be referencing planetary suns, aka solar systems. He was freely traveling as an ambassador of sorts, a lieutenant, if you will, of Lucifer, between the stones of fire, the individual planetary systems before the rebellion. And of course, he brings this manifesto of Lucifer, this license of liberty to proclaim oneself God, to break, in essence, the serenity, you know, to break the original design and go about one's own prodigal's journey, if you will, in which Lucifer becomes the chief prodigal son, of which, you know, the Lord would absolutely welcome him back. But as you know, the highest of these never return. But the kingdoms of men, of which they have deceived, not one is lost. Not a single ear that hears my word at this moment is lost and will be lost. Not a single ear that hears any of the words that any of us say that come from the planetary family of man will be lost. And those are powerful words, but those are the words of Jesus Christ. Those are his words, not mine. He's not going to lose a single one. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, if we have Marduk being referenced as Enki's son, but yet I'm telling you they're confusing Satan in reference as a part of the faction that created the birthing, and then by default they become the sons of Sam, the sons of Samyeza. Well, the point is that the Marduk connection is telling you that it's not the sons of Samyeza, it's the sons of Enki, aka Ea, whose home is water, and that's who you're looking at right here. So Marduk is Enki's son, but technically not in reality, because Enki is a spiritual being. He never had a material offspring, but the Marduk represents the Nephilim heritage and descendancy. Now here's a key point. Think about this. It is supposedly at least reported as being recorded by certain researchers and translators, Zachariah Sitchin would be one, that Marduk had a battle over his brother, or his brother Ra. We'll just call him Ra at this point, as it's referred, to keep it simple here. And as you know, Marduk at this time historically rewrites, and when I say Marduk, I'm not talking about a singular Marduk. There is no singular Marduk. There has been many singular Marduks that have titled and then entitled themselves after that line, that right to rule, that supremacy, all symbolized with the lion, of which you should know symbolizes the sons of God before and after rebellion. Citing Ezekiel chapter 19, these lions were taught to hunt. This is where they become this murderous band, if you will, that so many of these mystery religions are seeking to hide and then initiate you into the knowledge slowly but surely, and then weeding out of you what they think is wrong and placing in you what they think is good. But in all actuality, they're taking out of you what is already good. That's your sovereignty, and replacing it with their rule over you, and that's the knowledge, the empowerment that they have because they control that knowledge. Well, in essence, my point is that Enki is, by the tablet's own testimony, at least the translators will give you that Marduk is the son of Enki. Marduk is the son of Enki, not Enlil. Enlil is Satan. Enlil is Satan. Enki is the famed devil. Right? He's the guy with the pitchfork, all right, the Trinity, all right, the trident. Now you would relate this to Poseidon with water, and there you see Enki. He whose home is water. Other name is Ea, which literally means whose home is water. All right, now we're going to relate this to Enki before the rebellion, because you have to remember, he was Lord of the earth. He was prince of this world before the rebellion. Then Satan came, being symbolized as falling like lightning. And then we have the rebellion then is accepted. The doctrine is then is accepted by Enki. And then Enki leads the planet into rebellion. And then this is where the plan for his birthing into physical form comes. So Enlil is Satan and Nu is Lucifer. And we can time this up with the Bible in a unique sort of way, because Lucifer is only spoken about one time. And a lot of people love to say that. Well, actually, they'll say that Lucifer is not mentioned one time in the Bible. And then when you show them the one time that Lucifer is, then they kind of shut up and they say, well, it's just that one time. And then that doesn't really mean that it's just a title for something, for illuminated, for light bearer, for Venus, as they go on. And then this Venus connection, wow. I got a lot to say about that, no doubt. But we're already speaking about it. We're giving everybody the groundwork for at least the overstanding that I have of this situation. So Anu is Lucifer, Enlil is Satan, and Enki is the devil, otherwise known as the serpent, symbolized at least in Eden, connected with the serpent symbolism amongst many other symbolisms. But at least as it is being portrayed to us currently through the translators before us, it is now symbolized as a serpent. Okay? But Enki symbols also the caduceus, which is the serpent coming up the rod or the staff that Moses is famous for being commanded to create, right? And then now we see that symbolism symbolizes the medicinal schools and the hospitals and the physicians. That's their chief symbol, and it just so happens to be that Enki was considered the chief Sumerian physician, right? So it's not hard to see the imagery in the connection with the divinity and how people think they're going to attain this godhead through the chakra and rising the serpent up the chakric path, all right, in which now is the caduceus, the serpent upon the rod. The rod symbolizes now the spine, and then the 33 degrees of Freemasonry would represent the 33 vertebrae of which the ascension takes place. But then you have what creates the ascension, at least the ability for the serpent to invade the temple, is the death of Jesus Christ within your temple. So therefore, Jesus Christ crucified at 33, then they can achieve their cold-hearted divinity, of course, at that number as well. At least what they believe is their divinity, because they never get it. They get the control over men using deception and force, greed, power, anger, fear, wrath, envy, and jealousy. Yeah, they got that type of control, but that's not divine. That's devil. Right? That's satanic. Well, and that's exactly what they've symbolized themselves as. So they see themselves as the sons of Sam. All right? They would see themselves as the sons of Satan, which really is a high spiritual being that they have completely misjudged for some sort of material entity that has then spawned a generation or a descendancy, many generations of this descendancy of other material entities, other sons of Sam, other Satans, of which now they see themselves as Satan, which is prince of the powers of the ways of the air. And then this is where you get the Aryan prototype, if you will, which you get Aryan. That's the prince of the powers of the air, in other words, Satan. Okay? So there's a mix-up going on, is my point, with what they're being taught to believe, and then the unfortunate mistranslation by intended design of mistranslations that have been offered to the public concerning this. Why do you think they sacked those museums in Iraq, right? When we had Desert Storm, what did they do? They sacked those museums that had all of this artifact, all of this inscription, all this iconography that told the entire tale of who these beings were. And this is where we get to the point of Marduk, once again, being famous for what? Rewriting ancient history. Now, Marduk, famous for 50 names, connected back to Yahweh, also with these 50 names. As we know that Yahweh is the God of anger, wrath, vengeance, and jealousy. Yahweh is the mountain god. And then we know Yahweh is in semblance of this evolutionary idea of the Hebrews as they evolved from these Bedouin-like herders into what became a very devout religious people. Regardless of their fall, nonetheless, they're some of the most devoutly religious people on the face of the earth. I mean, they stick to their doctrine, there's no doubt about that. And they're very ceremonial, they're very ritualistic, they're very repetitive, and that's unfortunate because it should be spontaneous. You shouldn't have to pray the same exact words and do the exact same thing. That's when you're chained. That's when you're bound. That's what Jesus was trying to say. You don't got to have a special day. You don't got to have a special month. You don't got to wear special clothes. You don't got to have a special ring. You don't got to have a special planet. You don't have a special star. That's when you're bound. That's when you're walking in these chains of Orion. These are the beings that had to walk in that because it was based upon their sealing period and then the terrestrial energies that they had to manipulate to loose that seal. That then by default, by the men that have faultily translated these repercussions that have befallen the high spirit sons, now they have taken upon the repercussions upon themselves. And then they take these chains, this ball and chain of iron, and they willingly tout this throughout history, doing this supposed great work that turns into this intense labor for them to supposedly get to this point here at this end of the seventh stage, the seventh age that is symbolic of the seventh chakra, symbolized with purple, symbolizing royalty. But we know that it's the royalty that's symbolized with who? Babylon. She's decked in scarlet. She's decked in purple. Now we know that this purple is also symbolized in Ezekiel 28 in connection with Satan in the garden. But I really told you it's not Satan in the garden. It's Enki in the garden before the fall. Before the iniquity was found in him, we know that the iniquity comes from Satan when he falls like lightning from heaven. We know that this takes place in ancient times because Jesus Christ is looking at this and seeing back upon it. And of course, we know that we see the fall is in representation happening before Eden, before Eve takes the apple, because the deception of the serpent is already there. And whatever symbolism you want to see it, he's still the deceiver. And this is where they would lift the serpent up as the truth deliverer, because he's supposedly giving the way for mankind to reach divinity. But what do we see? No man has ever reached divinity that way yet. They would have you think, at least they're initiates, that these men have, and they've made it up to the moon, they've made it up to Mars, they've established, but they're only doing this to escape cataclysms. They're only doing this to escape destructions. We see that there was a few that were natural, and of course this is closer to the true remnant of the Anunnaki and their first two generational descendancies, otherwise known as the first fruits. But we see as it later progresses into history, world age by world age, they start causing the destructions themselves, due partly to the mistranslation of the scriptures previously before them, the iconography and the inscriptions, not yet scriptures. See what I'm getting at? And so now they see themselves as the new Anunnaki, the new Aryans to appear to this world after destruction, which they themselves have caused by supporting this hidden hand from the far side. So there's a lot of confusion with what even they think that they know about these spiritual hierarchies that they are believing are material entities. And I'm going to do my best to continue to explain this a little further. So the key would really be understanding that Marduk, with his 50 names, and then is recorded as rewriting the Sumerian epics and putting himself as what? The chief benefactor. Now, what happens with Enki, as you see now in the cult, the Satanist cults, the mystery religion cults, you see that the serpent is venerated, okay? And that's because they believe that he's opened up the third eye and showed everybody the way. That's just because they're mistranslating history. People are keeping information from them. It's even the very powers that be that they think are getting the information that they think they're right on. But it's really the information that's making everybody believe wrong so that they can stay under control. And that's what these PTBs really want, because they know the truth of the matter. The truth of the matter, Jesus Christ is real, and they're trying to flip the script. They're trying to flip the script of everybody's will because they know you got the choice to let these beings in. And it's these beings that have promised these high other men, considering themselves these sons of Sam, this particular divinity, that they are willing to do anything, as you see, to achieve, unfortunately. So that's where I come in. I do my best to show everybody every possible way, every possible manifestation, every possible truth about how this deception has taken place with the supposed serpent wisdom in his trick of this shortcut to the supposed divinity of perfection, which is you see that they've never obtained. You see they've never obtained it. And then at that moment, that's when you would basically consider the fall of man taking place. But there was really no fall of man, at least in their biblical interpretation of it, because they say that it's a fall from divinity before that point. Well, if you read the Bible, their eyes were not open before that point. So how could they have been divine before that point, at least from the biblical record? Supposedly they achieved the divinity after they ate the apple. Well, that's the truth of the matter. The supposed divinity, at least the sacred feminine divinity that they achieved, took place from the symbolism of them taking the dualistic fruit, the dualistic knowledge, and seeing that as the path to their supposed divinity, to their supposed Godhead, which you see, as I said, no man has reached. and they won't reach that way. It's the shortcut. It's what's wrapped up in the child's fable about the agenda. What's the goal? The goal is perfection. How do you reach perfection? By not cheating. That's right. By doing the right thing. Love your neighbors yourself. Love your father with all your might. You project love, forgiveness, mercy, not anger, wrath, and vengeance. That's what they're projecting to get what they need. They need a destruction. They need a cataclysm. They need a disaster to get something. Why do you need all that? Why can't you just enter the kingdom now? That's what Jesus said. You can enter the kingdom anytime you want. You ain't in no box. You're only in the boxes that you put yourself in. You are only in the boxes that you have willingly encased your own psyche in due to your own fear, and then in some ways inability to lead yourself into what truth is in a childlike manner, and to know that the best truth that anybody's ever uttered on this planet ever are the two greatest commands: do unto others as you would have done unto you, and love the Father, your heavenly Father, not your material play in heaven aven fathers. No, your real spirit Father, the first source and center of all things. And it's not Lucifer. It's not a geometry with a circle and a dot. But this is where the paradox comes in, with how these symbols do intercorrelate with certain divine truths with the construct of the universe and the solar system in which we find ourselves. Let us take an understanding here before, because we're gonna talk more about Marduk writing himself in as the benefactor. This is where the Nephilim themselves now are seen as the benefactor. As I told you, now the serpent is seen as the benefactor. They're flipping the script. They flipped the script a long time ago, but they couldn't flip the script for the entirety. It says you can fool some of the people some of the time, but you can't fool all the people all the time. That's what the cataclysm is building up to fool all the people all the time from that point forward, to erase the truth of Jesus Christ from their hearts, and to replace it with this doctrine, this ritualistic doctrine, this reptilian, trap yourself in the code, trap yourself in the numerology, trap yourself in the special day, trap yourself in the path of the stars. That's not what you want. You're a free being. You can do as you want. Jesus Christ said, was not the Sabbath created for man, and not man for the Sabbath? Man had become a slave to the very thing was to free him from the slavery. This one special moment where he could become free from the religious crude practices of the Sadducees and Pharisees and the blind Jews of that day. You see what I'm saying? You know, Jesus Christ is all about freedom from those things, not the bondage to it. They're about the bondage to it. They won't make a move or a muscle until it's the special day, the special star alignment. It has to be a special something for them to do anything, because they ain't special. Everything else is so special. Well, we're the real special. That's what the real truth is. That's what they hide from you. And then they are deceived into thinking they got to do all this bullshit to attain it. Guess what? You're already it. You're already it. Come on. You know? You can enter the kingdom now. But the problem is what people think are superpowers. You think jumping over tall buildings, stopping speeding bullets, reversing nuclear bombs and throwing them out into space to blow up in the middle of nowhere is what a Superman is. A red and blue S-wearing caped Superman. A Clark Kent, if you will. That's not a Superman. A Superman is somebody that can hear the words of God and do it. That's what a God is in this world. And that's what Jesus Christ proved was divine. That's what being divine is. Telling the truth. Mercy, forgiveness, and compassion, even for your enemy. Not smiting them down, not striking them down, not throwing stones at them, not condemning them to die. And then at the same time, Jesus Christ understood who was deceiving the children of men to even deceive the children of men under them, in which they controlled. And that was the enemy that made themselves the enemy to Jesus, that Jesus gave his life for. And that's why they will say to this day, they're covered in the blood of Christ. Well, yeah, you're covered in the blood of Christ in the sense that it's your doctrine that had him murdered. That's the blood that you're covered in. Your father is the murderer. And when I say your father is the murderer, I'm not talking to the entire audience. I'm quoting scripture in which this is what Jesus Christ says. And we know in which the father, the murderer, that has spawned these satanic ideologies, you know. And of course, murder has been spawned from this doctrine. Out of the mouth of the eater shall come forth meat. That means so many things. And this eater right here, or this meat right here that you see, this intended meat, is coming out of the mouth of a particular eater that is referenced with the symbolism of the apple. That apple, that consumption, the consumption is the eater. And of course, the meat comes forth from it. The meat is a high reflection in the fractal of the material form of the spirit identity of Enki, the fallen prince himself, wanting to come into material form, you know, setting forth an agenda from that period forward. And this would connect, as I said, with Anu and Enlil, being Satan and Lucifer, and they have already been sealed, guys. Okay, and if you would research the Sumerian tablets, the epics and the stories from the oldest to the most current, as they've offered them to us, you will see that in the beginning, Anu is making many visitations, Enlil is present, and then all of a sudden there's no more Anu and there's no more Enlil. It's only Enki and then the lesser subordinates and the other demigods from that point forward. All right, and then you can track this scripturally as well in the Hebrew Bible. You see the same thing, but you have to know what you're looking for, of course. You have to know the relativity of the context of the stories, especially Ezekiel chapter 28, Job chapter 38, a few others. But my point is that Enki is then the only deity that is spoken about from a specific point forward, because Lucifer, Anu, and Satan, Enlil, are detained. Now they would have you believe that Enlil and Enki were against each other. Wrong. Enlil and Enki work together. It's the descendants that could be considered Enlilites, and then of course Mardukites, which would be the descendants of Enki. And then this is where you get them pitting this business between the descendants of Ra and Marduk against each other, which is a part of the deception. That's where they're hiding massive amounts of information from you guys and not letting you realize the real significance of who these identities are. All right? So the key here, the real key, is to understanding that these Marduks, these many Marduks, Marduk, the god of 50 names, this Nephilim descendancy, is rewriting the ancient history. It's recorded that he's done it, they've done it, them have done it, and then they've made themselves look as the benefactor. And then now it's that history that they are using to support their doctrine, in which they would say they're not, to tell you the truth. But in all actuality, you know that everything with their sacred feminine doctrine, as we have exposed it, will tell you that's exactly what they're doing. Exactly. And they just continually separate particular personalities into multiple personalities, give them different characters, and then you would believe that they're separate or even opposed to each other, when in all actuality, 9 times out of 10, it's the same personality, or it's the league of personalities that are not opposed that are actually working together, as in the case with Lucifer, Satan, and the devil, in other words, LSD, in which you see is responsible for what? The grand illusion, in which we're not really in, because we've entered the kingdom. At least I like to think some of you have, you know. But for everybody else, it's believing they're in a box and they got to get freed from a club and all this mystery work and all this great labor, and people got to die to make them divine. You guys are the ones that are lost. You know, that's really lost. That's not divine. That's satanic as it gets. That's satanic as it gets, and it's blind as it gets too. It's really blind as it gets when it comes down to it. So let's talk about here. It says, Enki called at first Ea, he whose home is water, was clearly associated with water bearer Aquarius. Now, Aquarius is the age that we're about to go into, right? The age of Aquarius, and you know all the occultic songs that go with it. The age of Aquarius, all that blah blah, right? All right, well, that's the ages. I'm telling you that Enki is going to be birthed into the material form. All right, and then we see this this descendancy known as the Nephilim that eventually get known under the titlement of Marduk and the symbolism that goes with it, begin to rewrite mass the beguiler becomes the benefactor. We had a few audio outages, unfortunately. The one back I was talking about the tortoise and the hare, and I said that it's the hare, the symbolism in the fable that children have been taught, where the rabbit tries to win the race. The race is the goal. The goal, at least to the rabbit, is perfection and divinity. But we see that the rabbit cheats to do it. That's the deception. And then we see that the rabbit doesn't win. The rabbit goes through a lot of drama, if you will, and still loses at the end. Now, that's them. That's the sacred feminine. And then we know that the tortoise being symbolized with the sure way, which Jesus Christ refers to as the straight and narrow, which is in essence not cheating, which is what the rabbit's doing, which is symbolism for deception. I mean, that's the biggest cheat that you could possibly do. So if you got to cheat to achieve some sort of divinity, the divinity that you're achieving is the image of a beast. And that's what, in essence, the devil, Enki, is about to enter into. That's where he becomes the abomination. That's where he becomes the abomination of the temple, because the temple is the body. All right? So if he's the high spirit being that enters into a material temple body, we know that material temple body is just the form of a beast. That's what a man is in Ecclesiastes. He's just a beast of the earth. All right, a material form, 666, mark of the beast, also simultaneously number of man. So now this high spirit Enki becomes the abomination of desolation, the destroyer, aka Apollyon, entering into material form. Now, why would he be wanting to enter into material form? Well, we know that he's the Lord of the earth, but yet he's been cast down from that position by his own default. We know that he's the prince of this world. At least Jesus Christ refers to him as the fallen prince of this world. But because he's the prince of this world, the book of Enoch says something very important. It says spirits, terrestrial spirits born on this earth must stay on this earth. So Enki inexplicably as being a terrestrial spirit. Now when I say terrestrial, I don't mean that he is a physical being, that his soul has incarnated into the prince of this world. No, he has never been a physical being. But he is a spiritual being he is a spiritual being fulfilling the role of ruler of a terrestrial sphere. And therefore, Enki knows intimately the terrestrial and the spiritual energies of this world, the transmutation between physical and spiritual energies as they exchange themselves. And of course, that's the symbol for the star tetrahedron, which is the symbolism for as above, so too below, which now symbolizes the geometry of the atom, and then it symbolizes even the geometry of our own terrestrial sphere known as Earth, and then connected to that would be circumscribed tetrahedral geometry, which is the chief number to identify it readily would be, or the chief series of numbers would be 19.5, which we know represents a specific latitude, and the 19.5 north and 19.5 south would be where the two outer points of the triangles of the star tetrahedron would locate themselves if you were to circumscribe it into a sphere of equal size and then aligned it with its axis of rotation. Okay, so Enki himself has all of that knowledge. Okay, even before the rebellion, he knows everything about the terrestrial energies and as well as the spiritual exchange of those terrestrial energies on this world. And that symbol, the Star of David, as it's come down to us as known, is the key to understanding that. And that becomes the chief obsession, the code, so to say, to crack, aka the seal in which he must undo, because it's that very seal that bars high spiritual beings like him from entering into And of course, as you know, he needs your permission now to do it because mankind has been given dominion over the earth. That earth is the seal, the earth in representation of that circumscribed tetrahedral geometry that, as I said, will relate all the way back to the smallest particulates, the energy outline, the geometry as it equates itself from an atom to the earth, symbolized or manifested through certain energies of the magnetic field as they would enact with certain physical mediums that we could see their energy imprint on, so to say, like clouds at the polar regions. And then we know that a hexagonal form shows up at particular polar regions of all the planets in the solar system, at least all of those that we can observe. We have seen this hexagonal impression, and this hexagonal impression is one of the key markers for the 19.5 circumscribed tetrahedral geometry being proven to be manifesting, being in action at that moment, which I told you now is in representation of the infinite spirit, at least the energy equational outworking of the infinite spirit, which what so many other people call the Holy Ghost. And this would bring us back to what Jesus Christ said. He said, you can blaspheme me or you can blaspheme the Father. But those that blaspheme, aka the infinite spirit, Holy Ghost, they're going to have no forgiveness. And we find out that the forgiveness doesn't necessarily come because God is unable to do it, but it's because once man has gone so far to ascribe the very powers of God to the devil, then these men will hardly seek repentance. They've gone so far that they are literally blasting out the infinite spirit energy from the atomic matter. That's what CERN is doing. That's what you know. They're looking for dark matter. How do you get dark matter? Well, you blast out all of this light energy from it. That light energy represents the spiritual resonance or the intended resident of the infinite spirit, which pervades all space. All space, and of course, matter is space. It's the chief vessel occupation for space, inner and outer. And so therefore, CERN is now blasting, as Jesus Christ conveniently said, blaspheming. Okay, so now they are blasting this infinite spirit energy out because it becomes the spiritual resident. The spiritual resident is not going to allow the occupation. That's the seal that's barring Enki from entering into the material domain of the atoms and becoming this Adam himself in this world. So there you see it equationally all work itself out if you really understand it. You know what I mean? And then this is where you can begin to equate it yourself and realize for so many of you that the club that you're in basically is like the old caveman with the club that has knocked you over the head silly and is dragging you into the darkness to do Lord knows what with you. You know what I mean? You don't need no club. You need a club to make you special, to make your life great. You know, materially, right, with a bunch of material crap, but these material craps doesn't make spiritual happiness. It might give you the illusion of some sort of material happiness, but it's most certainly not a spiritual fulfillment, because we see so many of these people are cold and callous. And Jesus Christ said it's easier to put a camel through the eye of a needle than a rich man through the gates of heaven. And we know what all that means because this camel in symbolism of Gimel, the G in the geometry that we know is equative of this agenda that Enki worked out in the beginning to put himself into the material womb. We know that the camel represents Satan. We see that in reference from the G. And then this comes from an early Hebrew term for Gimel. We know that Gimel is Satan, at least referenced as a camel in symbolism in one ancient Hebrew perspective of the Garden of Eden event. So this Gimel is what Jesus is referencing when he says that it's easier to put a camel through the eye of a needle. Well, you know what the eye of the needle is, right? Because that's what obelisks are called. Obelisks are called needles, guys. You know, an obelisk is a phallus, which is a penis, which represents what? Genetic heritage. It represents the chief seaman. Well, who's the chief seaman? Well, that's Ea, he whose home is water. Lord of the flowing waters. Seaman, seaman, Aquarius. See what I'm saying? See what I'm saying? So Jesus knows what he's talking about, you know? I need you to see that Jesus knows what he's talking about and to draw closer to the truth of Jesus Christ, not the reality of these men that are trying to confuse the truth of Jesus Christ with their own deluded image of some supposed truth of themselves. You know what I mean? So Enki is trying to enter into the material form, and this whole process, he has used his infinite knowledge of the working terrestrial and spiritual energies of this world. He knew exactly how to manipulate them. And you see that plan has been given to them as this sacred geometry and this mystery religion. I don't know when the next audio outage is going to take place. Give me a few seconds. We know that, the point is to understand the records have already openly been shown to be rewritten and give this perspective of this ancient heritage and this ancient descendancy. The key is to really understanding this relationship with Marduk symbolically and Enki being his father, and then seeing Marduk as the heritage, the Nephilim heritage, the sons of Iron, Orion, the sons of Sam, and also the later descendants called Dan, which will be the anagram for DNA. And then Dan is like a lion's whelp that will leap forth from Bashan, Bashane, and that would be the land of giants. And this would correctly put us back to the placement and symbolism with the Anunnaki from Genesis 6. So even when you view their popular culture, their movies right now, they're symbolizing the Marduk lion everywhere. And then, as I said, you can crack the code of the understanding of the lion by looking into Ezekiel chapter 19. That chapter 19 is no accident because it's relative to our 19.5 circumscribed tetrahedral geometry, which is relative to the seal. And that's where you see the sealing takes place for these lions that were taught to hunt. Now, the key is that they were taught to hunt who? Not taught to hunt devils, not taught to hunt demons and people that were doing bad stuff to men. They were taught to hunt men. All right? Now, Aerosmith, you guys got to fess up, man. We know what your band name is all about. We know what your songs are all coded about. You can't catch me because the rabbit done died. What rabbit you plan on killing? Huh? Because there's rabbits that are part of your organization, right? And it's going to be people that believe that they're a part of your organization that you're going to take out, that you're going to use as the ploy to make everybody else think here on Earth that the bad guys are really gone. What your high hand has been setting up the whole time. So the Aerosmith, the arrow, that's what the hunter's casting, right? We see that in the seal of the United States with the eagle carrying the arrows. That's Ezekiel chapter 17. And then we know that's referenced with the eagle men and the shin ring. We go back to the Anunnaki gods, and you see the eagle carrying the ring. And then the second part of Aerosmith's name is the smith. Well, who's smith? Well, you need a metalsmith to work the iron or Orion. That's exactly what it's all about, Aerosmith. Can't catch you because the rabbit done died? Well, you're going to get God. Plain and simple, and that's what I'm here to tell you. Yeah, it's easy for you guys to get me. It's real easy. I'm right here and wide open. I done give them my address, telephone number. I'll stand outside of my house and wave at agents as they pass by. I can tell you in every building they're in right now. And of course they've moved from the buildings because they knew I was on to them. You guys know. But, they got to do all this deception and everything to make everything work. I don't got to do nothing but breathe air, drink water, and eat food and give praises to the Most High. And everything works out for me. It's because I got faith. I got real faith, and I've had it ever since I was a child, and I know there's many other people that do, but a lot of people get into a lot of stuff in their life. I don't got no kids, I'm not married, I'm ready to go for this mission, full blown. I can take it to its fruition, and I'm going to do that, God willing. And that's not too hard to conceive if you're trying to do the will of God. And the will of God is to help people, It's to free people. It's to teach them the mercy and the truth and to forgive one another, and not teaching them blood doctrines like vampires. Not teaching them to look at any sort of RH negative or any O positive or any of that crap. None of that. It's not teaching them to look at no doctrine of racism whatsoever.